everyone, and welcome to another episode of Hometown History. I'm Jamie.
I'm Domi.
Tonight's episode is called 3.4. We are a walk to wander, taking in Penn Street's challenges and promises. We are live on Facebook, and we are also in person. Our location tonight is at Penn Market, downtown, beautiful building. We encourage you guys to come and check it out when it is open. If you are still trying to catch us in person tonight, please come in through the Penn Street entrance.
And if we sound a little muffled, it's because there's fans running because it's
So
pretty
hot.
hot and humid, so we're trying to project. So let us know in the comments if we have any issues with audio, and we'll try and be louder for you guys.
Yeah, that's tonight's agenda.
Okay, so we took a mile-long walk to wonder, and that begins at the south end of Penn Street and at Knowledge Park and the original village of Bottstown. And then we're going to take you northbound, stopping at the Codorus Creek, MLK Park, Friendship Community Garden, and the Princess Street School. And then, of course, we're going to highlight Penn Market, where we're at tonight, and the location of tonight's filming. And finally, we're going to hit the Arc Bridge and the end at Park.
Yeah. So the inspiration behind this was Jim, who is the master researcher behind this. He did hours of work, and he really helped us put together this great presentation. We wanted to take a walk together, and so we started south and worked our way north. By the end, going up Park, we were all huffing and puffing.
We really saw out of shape we've become.
And so we thought we would just take you along this journey, talk about, most importantly, the Penn Street Vision Plan that came out recently with Montez, but then also talk about the history of the different places that we stopped at.
Yes.
We have three main takeaways. So I'm an educator full-time, and of course at the end of every lesson we want you to learn something. So the first takeaway is that Penn Street and its corridor is one of those city neighborhoods that hasn't attracted a lot of investment, but parts have been unchanged since the focal area of the York race riots back in the 60s and 68 and 69. But there's a plan to try to change that. And that brings us to difference makers like Montez Parker II, who has a new baby named Miles. He's 2 months old, so he's a new dad.
Just like you, a new mom.
Yeah. Otto is here. He is in the back. You can imagine he is passed out because it's so warm in here.
But if you hear any crying, it's the baby.
Yeah. And so Montez left York, but then he came back, and he came back with this new vision. And I wanted to give a shout out to millennials. I feel like millennials got a bad rep when we were growing up, that we were just like obsessed with our phones all the time and social media, but now we're becoming the new leaders, and we want to highlight Montez and others like him in the area.
We're the nerdy millennials.
Yeah, that's true. And then finally, when we read through the Penn Street Vision Plan, if we could put one word on it, it would be that it is like a coordinator,
right,
or a connector. It by no means is trying to come in and solve all the community's problems.
Right.
Instead, it's kind of like a hand up instead of a hand out. And so the goal, for example, is to not bring in chain stores, but instead support locals who are already here and help them thrive even more.
Connect the community.
Exactly. So a little bit about me. My name is Jamie Norpel. I am a high school history teacher full-time. I got my master's and doctorate from Penn State, Harrisburg in American Studies. Jim and I run a website called Witnessing York, where this will be an article that you can go and read later. And I'm a new mom, so that's cool.
Otto's the cutest.
Yeah, he's pretty
really
cute.
is. And I'm Domi Miller, and I'm a Third Circuit Court of Appeals librarian during the day. And as my hobby, I am a Civil War reenactor with the 87th York, historically recruited out of York. And I run the Facebook group, Preserving the History of Newberrytown.
Yeah. And you have a presentation, a performance coming up next weekend.
I do, yes. So I will be in the 160th Gettysburg reenactment, and on July 2nd, I will be presenting in costume as a Daughters of Charity nun during the Civil War at the Seminary Ridge Museum at 2 p.m. on July 2nd.
Yay!
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And I just found out today I'm taking over the Lewisberry Area History Lovers group.
What? Are you serious?
I am, yes.
Were you voluntold?
Yes. So it's going to be under the umbrella of Preserving the History of Newberrytown.
Congrats.
So now I'm preserving Newberrytown and Lewisberry Borough.
You've got a merger.
I do, yeah. An acquisition. I acquired Lewisberry.
So let's begin our presentation tonight down at Knowledge Park.
Okay, so it's called a learning laboratory. So over $27 million in income for locals at this learning laboratory, and there are new employment opportunities, and it doesn't have to be with the YCP directly. There will be space for rent, so people can come in that aren't directly related to that.
Yep.
And then it's being constructed on over 40 acres.
Yep.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
So that's big. And it's the former Schmidt and Alt paper mill. And if you watched our last episode on ghost signs, They actually have a ghost sign there that says it's the paper mill, and they repainted it, and it looks kind of nice.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So this is a building that has been renovated. It's being renovated by York College. It's known as this learning lab, and the idea is it's trying to give children, or they're not children, but they're in their teens.
Young
to
adults.
me, they seem like kids. Students in college who want experience in an industry. So the idea is to connect them with local businesses, and so they can have these amazing internships and real world experience, so they don't graduate and then realize at the end of 4 years that that's not what they want to do.
Well, and I like the fact that it's called a learning laboratory, because it just sounds so hands-on.
Yep. So shout out to your college for purchasing this and renovating it. We're very excited when this starts. Here is a picture of the old building, and you can see how it's going to be renovated. And like Domi said, $27 million in income. So we want to celebrate this, that it is going to be a place for lots of jobs and just opportunities and storefronts, and it's very promising.
Well, yeah, and it's exactly what York needs. Yeah. You know, you need to inject knowledge and opportunity into the city.
Exactly, yeah. So let's go back in history then and talk about the very first town that was in this area. It's called Bottstown.
Yes. So Hermanus Bott, that's a name if you ever heard one.
Hermanus.
Hermanus.
Otto would kill me. Hermanus. Well, people don't know Otto. They say Odo a lot.
Oh, really? See, I got Otto right away. Otto Hermanus Norpel. Not quite.
Do you want to be bullied?
Well, poor Hermanus, we're making fun of him, but he was actually an immigrant who came to York from Germany, so that's where Hermanus came from. It's German. So in 1753, and he probably stood where the current Knowledge Park is planned, looking at the west end of York, and he envisioned a town that would compete with the then 12-year-old York. So surveyors laid out about 50 lots, 65 feet wide, along what is today the West Market, and 460 feet long. So those are pretty big plots. I mean, you know, for that time period. And it became known as Bottstown. And it was thought to be York's earliest, well, historians called it Bottstown.
Yeah.
Instead of Bottstown. So that's a little unfortunate, but I mean, I don't know, that sounds German. Hermanus Bottstown. God bless him. So the next year, work started on the courthouse in Yorktown, and they built the market sheds beside the courthouse, and they were strategically placed on major roads that crossed in the center of town, which makes sense. If you're going to have a market, you want it to be accessible to the people bringing things in. Yeah, so Bottstown could never really catch up, unfortunately. And the West Bank did get an indoor market house, the Penn Market, and we're here today. But it took almost 100 years, so just after the Civil War is when the market finally came.
Yep. So when you think about like old school Bottstown, its western border would have been Penn Street. Right. And there's also Smyserstown and Eberton, which is later West York. So you can see how these areas have changed a lot in name and over time. The avenues, of course. So this all used to be agricultural land, and those three locations began filling it in to the north and to the west and to the south. Unfortunately for Hermanus, by 1884, Bottstown is going to cease to exist. That is because about 300 people lived here at the time, and the borough of York decided they were going to absorb it. So Bottstown became merged with the city of York. Sorry, Botts, your name is not remembered, but you know, here we are talking about.
He needs a sign or something, I feel like.
This is kind of cool because I think that it shows that we can work together and merge. One of the challenges of Pennsylvania, do you know how many municipalities are in York County, Pennsylvania?
A lot.
You know how many?
72.
72! Woo! 72 municipalities. That means small local governments. And so when you think about merging, like I was thinking about Newberrytown and Goldsboro and Lewisberry, and what if they all merged? No. We're having anarchy in the audience.
It is a thought though, because something unique about the area is how many municipalities we have and all these little local governments together, and does it make sense to have so many audience participation tonight? We have a woman saying, yes, it does.
So here's one of the benefits. The benefits is that you can get stuff done. There's not as much red tape because you are boots on the ground and it can be efficient.
Right.
One of the challenges is sometimes, like for example, from Yoboro, which is where I'm from, we would buy salt for the roads in the wintertime, and then Red Lion would also buy salt, and Dallastown would buy salt, and we would spend more money instead of coordinating and figuring out how we can all work together. And so we're not condoning merging. Right. Well, and so there's pros and cons. So let's talk. I see some ANSI participation that we will get into the Q&A. I want to hear what you have to say. So that brings us to moving north. We are going to continue walking up to, oh, there's a picture, by the way, of all the municipalities in New York.
Yeah, that gives you a really good visual representation.
Of all, yeah.
If the clicker works. There we go. So now we're walking north to the Codorus Creek. So did you know that 1/3 of York County's water drains into Codorus Creek?
It's a lot.
So that's a lot of water. So it not only sustains our ecosystem, but it waters our crops, but it's also been victimized by the industrial and residential waste pollution, which I think is just, that's all you hear these days about polluting our waterways, unfortunately. And that's been happening for centuries. And its reputation of foul-smelling odors and the filth endured its nickname, Inky Stinky.
Stinky.
That's so sad, but I'm not gonna lie, I have smelled it. So, it comes by the name, honestly. Although it has improved and fishing is coming back.
It
so
is
that's
a lot
good.
better.
It's getting a lot better. Yeah, so maybe Inky Stinky can be just sort of like smelly. Doesn't have to be as bad. But unfortunately, the dumping does date back to 1816. So I think a lot of people think of pollution and littering as a modern issue, but it's not. They just didn't realize the environmental effects that it was having back then.
That's a good point.
We're better educated now, so we understand the issues that it's causing, but they were doing this back in the 1800s. And reports of sewage and industrial waste darkening the water prompted people to look for alternatives. So that's when York Water began offering fresh water in wooden pipes and continued into the 20th century.
Wooden pipes.
Wooden, yeah. So can you imagine all the leaks that they had to deal with and all the issues?
We have a leak right now in our sink.
Oh no.
I know, it's such a pain. Yeah. The York County Economic Alliance is coming in with the Codorus Beautification Initiative, and they are going to be spending a lot of money through grants and other fundraising initiatives to try to really transform the Codorus into this place that people want to go to. So the plan is to increase the recreational amenities on both sides of the creek. They're going to plant native plants to increase the habitat for local plants and animals. This is also going to help with flood control, which will then keep our city more safe. Here is a video that they created that kind of gives you a visual of what to expect. What we really like about this is that it will be close to the rail trail, and so if you decide to go for a walk or a jog or a bike ride, you can pop off and go down to the Codorus and enjoy this lovely river, is that a small river, creek that we really have. So here it just gives you an idea of what it's going to look like.
And their renderings are beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, if it really comes to fruition, that would be great.
Thing I'm most excited about, paddleboarding.
You and your paddleboard.
I have a blow-up paddleboard and I love it. I pack it up in my Subaru and I take it and I go places. And so I love the idea, Domi and I, going down and chilling by the creek and having a picnic.
I'll kayak beside you.
One time I tried doing yoga on a paddleboard and I got so sick.
Why?
It was like you're moving and I got really sick.
You're more brave than I am.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. Yeah.
If you see Jamie doing yoga on her paddleboard,
it will last all but 10 minutes because it does not work. So we're going to continue north now and get to MLK Park.
Okay, so what now is MLK Park used to be the Codorus Street neighborhood, so it changed names. So after World War I, industrialization boomed and York County offered employment in factories such as Densley, and the now vacant building is visible from MLK Park in York County, and now Johnson Control is visible from Penn Street. So the black people from south came north, and these jobs is what is now known as the Great Migration. So a lot of people were moving from the south into the cities up north and finding industrialized jobs. So after finding a job, many settled in the neighborhoods west of the Codorus, and that's where over 73 addresses from Penn Street to Green Street existed at the time. So that's a lot of people.
And this, just to take a second, this is what's interesting is that when you think about York historically, it was mostly a lot of Germans and Scots-Irish, English that settled in this area, and so it's predominantly white. But what we're going to see is after the 1910s and 1920s, after the Great Migration, there are a lot of industrial opportunities like Densupply to come and work, and so the racial composition is going to change significantly into the teens and 20s.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to hit Sandra Stockton, because she grew up in this area.
Oh, Sandra's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to read you a quote from Sandra. "I don't have money to give my kids, but I have memories." And that's why she wrote her book, 480 Codorus Street. And she said, We had white next door neighbors as poor as we were. Everyone knew everyone's kids. And you can read her book, 480 Codorus Street, and talking about her time living there. So that just goes to show, you know, it was sort of like an equalizer.
Yeah, well, and how York County keeps on changing. It keeps on
does,
changing.
yes.
One of the things that frankly sucks that happened in York is this thing called redlining. So while families like Sandra's escaped the severe Southern racism, when they came up to York, it wasn't completely equal. It wasn't like this paradise. So instead they found themselves confronting discrimination, especially during the Great Depression. So when the Great Depression hit, 1 out of every 4 Americans lost their jobs and were unemployed. And that, of course, hit York County as well. So redlining, you can see in this image here, this is when people can't get loans because the area has been identified as too poor to be worth the financial risk. Housing policies like this made it really hard for people to own their own homes. And so it discouraged investments, and it caused houses to become dilapidated because you couldn't get funding.
Right.
And so Penn Street actually, just as a side note, does have a higher rate of home ownership compared to York City.
Yes.
But in this image here, in the outline, that's outlining Penn Street. And if you look at the coding, the yellow is deemed as definitely declining, and the red is hazardous. And this is where a lot of people then couldn't get investments to increase their houses.
Right.
And again, this is known as redlining. We also have white flight too, where we have Caucasians who were able to then get investments, and then move out of the city.
Right.
Yep. So in 1961, these neighborhoods that we're talking about, the Codorus Street homes, which is current day Martin Luther King Jr. Park, they were torn down for eminent domain. And on one hand, people lost their houses. Their houses were torn down, and that sucks, frankly. That's not cool. Instead, they built a park. And so I would be interested to see in the comments what people think about this, or even later with the Q&A. Domi and I tend to pick topics that are like one-room schoolhouses and signs. Today's topic, it comes with a lot of different opinions, and we'd be curious to see what your opinion is about this, especially we have Montez Parker here, who is instrumental in the Penn Street Vision Plan. So what do you think about eminent domain? What do you think about changing houses in the landscape for parks? Do you think there's a pro and con? We don't want to have a crazy debate, but a lively discussion would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yep. So with MLK Park, a lot of the plan, it calls for increase in better sidewalks to make it more user-friendly, and also coming in with the pavement to improve the pavement, because generally there are some hazardous places.
Right.
And if we have our kids playing here, we want to make sure it's safe. So I'm excited to see these changes coming our way for MLK Park. Yep. So this brings us then to why we're doing this tonight, like the Penn Street Vision Plan and what it does, because the area still isn't really receiving a lot of investments.
Right, so there's definitely a difference between West Side and East Side in York. So the West Bank of the Codorus has seen improvement. East Bank, I apologize. The East Bank of the Codorus has seen improvement. The baseball stadium, the Yorktown Hotel, new sidewalks, etc. And the West Side hasn't received the same love, unfortunately. So some point out that things haven't changed much or at all, particularly along Penn Street. So did the race riots of 68 and 69 scare the people away? Whatever the cause, parts of Penn Street corridor and nearby Salem Square neighborhood have gained a reputation for poverty and violence. And today there's a call for action through investment, which is why we're here tonight talking about this. And in April, Montez Parker II introduced the Penn Street Vision Plan. He, along with Murphy and, I want to say that right, Dittenhafer Architects, interviewed residents of the neighborhood, the community leaders, and local government agencies. And the plan calls for renovation of buildings, connection of green spaces, better housing, and an increase of businesses. You can read this plan online. This is a screenshot of my computer where you can read all 61 pages, Montez? I think 61 pages?
61 sounds about right.
Yeah.
61, yeah. But it's worth reading. I know that sounds daunting to some people, but it really is important to York, and I'd say it's worth the read.
And it's well written, so
it is.
That's cool. Made it enjoyable. So this is what inspired Hometown History to do our episode here tonight. And so we want to quote Montez here. He went to Mayor Helfrich, who of course lives in this area, and they just talked about different solutions. And one thing that the mayor stressed to Montez is that he wants real solutions, and he wants to see strategies that will sustainably change the neighborhood for the better. So Montez says, when you look at the history of Penn Street, the social uprising, Princess Street Center, the Codorus homes and more, you can understand the anxiety that comes with creating a new vision to inclusively develop this neighborhood. So if you live on Penn Street, please comment below and tell us your thoughts and tell us your opinions, because we want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, and it's important to point out we don't live there, so we can only talk on the subject so much.
Right.
So it's very important to hear from the people that actually live in the community and that it's affecting every day.
Good point. So let's review what we've learned so far about housing before we move on to our next stop on our walk.
Okay, so for your recap, originally those early tenants of Bottstown were required to build a house at least 20 feet square with brick, stone chimney, and a lime sand foundation.
Which I thought was kind of cool, because when you think about Permanent Bott, and when he laid down the ground rope, he said, we want to make sure that your fireplaces aren't going to catch all your neighborhoods on fire. So make sure your chimney is made out of stone or brick to protect it.
He thought ahead,
Yeah.
which was very smart. So all of this in less than 2 years.
They had to build it.
Yeah, and they started to build on the fertile land of the Codorus Creek's bank in the late 1700s. The town prospered and more black migrants moved into the neighborhood into the 1920s. And then when the Great Depression hit, redlining and other discriminatory practices led to the decline of the area. So today, the Penn Street Vision Plan made housing one of its main focus areas.
The Penn Street corridor has 101 parcels. 78% are residential buildings, and the other 22% are commercial or religious or community spaces. There are two major themes of the vision plan. One is access for all. The Penn Street corridor actually, like I said, has a higher level of home ownership than the rest of the city, so
Right.
let's play to that. That's a strength.
Absolutely.
The idea is to build on what's already there and to implement plans like the state's Whole Home Repairs Program. This provides homeowners up to $50,000 to improve the water and energy efficiencies and other habitation improvements. The next one is to also expand develop opportunities. So what we're seeing here is we want to increase the use of mixed-use buildings or vacant spaces. So we want to convert existing structures that are already there into this mixed-use space.
Right.
So we jumped ahead a little bit north on our walk, but this is an example here at 50 Penn Street, North Penn Street. So what they're thinking is that on the bottom level, this could be a beautiful location for some type of commercial enterprise or a business, and above it, those could be apartment buildings. So above it, where those apartment buildings, we're talking about bringing in rent, but then also people. More people in a city is good. It means they're taking their money and they're investing it back into the economy. Here is what a rendering would look like if we redid the building. And I just pulled one example of the ideas of commercial investments on Penn Street, but they had at least 3 or 4 other pictures of here's this building, here's what it could look like if we invest.
Right. And I love to see buildings being reused. They're not tearing it down and making something brand new. They're using what's already there.
Yeah. Well, the historian in us, right?
I know.
Like, we
I
love
love to see a building recycled, reused.
So continuing our walk north, we're going to hit a garden.
Okay, so the Friendship Community Garden. There used to be a vacant lot when you hit West College, and it was filled with weeds and litter. And as Jim McClure wrote, quote, "It served as a symbol, unfair in some cases, for that neighborhood. There is crime there, but there's many good people too." So about 4 years ago, Yoko and Robert Enomoto decided to change that, and they created the Friendship Community Garden that cultivated neighborhood pride alongside their beautiful flowers and vegetables. And when we walked past it, it was a really cute garden. Yeah, they're doing a really great job. And the corner lot has even been called an oasis of peace, which I love. That's a great example. So years ago in 1969, this intersection was the location of a murder. Assailants fired at an armored vehicle carrying police officers in the race revolts, killing Officer Henry Shad. So thankfully today, the garden is a safe space for many who want to dwell among the flowers. So I think it's great that they took a place that sort of had a bad reputation and this sad history attached to it and really turned it into something beautiful.
A beautiful place that people want to visit and be together.
Yes.
Yep. So we're walking north. Are you tired yet? I know I'm sweating.
It was a hot day when we walked too.
It's hot in here right now too. So this is the Penn Street School. Here is a rendering of when it was first built. Anyone from York familiar with architecture can probably guess who designed it. Yes, the Princess Street School. Does anyone know who designed it? Yeah, you got it. Yep, the York Denville design. So this dates back to 1889, and originally this was an all-white school. and it remained so until 1951. Side note, Brown versus Board of Education, which desegregated schools, wasn't until 1954. So I personally think that it's very cool that the Princess Street School desegregated before they had to. So the superintendent invited a lot of black students from the neighborhood to attend. Now, the school unfortunately shut down in 1962, but then it quickly reopened as a community center. It had a daycare there, it had a taekwondo studio, there were large classrooms, and there still are. There is a gym there. And so for decades, it served as this glue, this connector of people, this like community hub, and it was a resource. It had a reputation for being a resource for families. So unfortunately, it is closed because of water damage, but according to the report, it has good bones.
That's good to know.
Right.
Yeah.
So whoever buys it is going to have to address the mold issue and probably replace some windows, but generally it is structurally sound. It is 7,500 square feet. Right now, the city of York is the current owner, and we're excited to see what happens with this in the next few years.
We sound like we're like pitching it. Like, who wants to buy this building with good bones?
So let's go to where we are now, the Penn Street, or Penn Market.
Penn Market, yeah. So the vision plan calls to reignite Penn Market, and I love that wording. We're reigniting the market. Reigniting the market. So it's York's oldest public market house, and renovations can start this year. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. So the original inhabitants of Bottstown had access to fresh foods brought in from farmers at the market at the center of town. And then when the Industrial Revolution hit, York's population grew in numbers, forcing the residents to spread out. So in 1866, the farmers market at Penn and Market was formed in 1866 to service more people. So the more people that come into the area, the bigger the market needs to be, the more accessible it needs to be. And the current investments of $3 million will be put to good use. It will enhance an already thriving market. For the first time since the early 2000s, the vendor stalls are filled, which is amazing. And there's even a waiting list with 24 different vendors offering items from beauty products to produce to home decor. And when we were here on our walk, we came in first to the Penn Market, and it was poppin'. Yeah. I mean, there was music, live music playing. We met Loretta Claiborne was here.
Right. And there are concerns with the market in that sometimes the stalls aren't always open.
Right.
We're not guaranteeing that every time you come in it's going to be always hoppin', but it can be sometimes, and that's what we want to highlight. Also, what's cool about the market is that it's kind of like this community watering hole where people like come together and talk about things. Newberrytown, do we have a community watering hole? The Blue Sky Tavern?
The Blue Sky Tavern would be a good one.
The library, right? That's where people
the Redland
go.
Community Library. Rudders, the gas station.
That's so true, Rudders.
Walmart, I see everybody in town when I go grocery shopping.
Where was it? Iron Horse on the Square is another location. Oh, you're talking about in New York City. In New York City. Yep. So we love that this is a gathering place, and we want to see it do even better with more people here. So, one other thing we want to highlight too is that there is an attempt to bring in more live entertainment.
Right.
And so there is going to be Anderson & Anderson is going to be here on June 24th. And then also there are some different initiatives, so go check out their website or also their Facebook page, and you can find more information.
Okay, so we're headed north to the Penn Street Art Bridge, and if you haven't been here, I highly suggest going to see it. It was the highlight of our walking tour. It was built in the 1990s to replace the bridge that motorists used to get over the old Western Maryland Railroad tracks. And it was actually used to be a drawbridge, which I thought was amazing. I didn't know that at the time when we got there. And it could be lifted by a crew of Pennsylvania Railroad workmen who used railroad jacks, cranes, and muscle power to lift the bridge surface.
And here you can see a picture of them. They went in and they lifted it from 9:30 in the morning until 11 o'clock. 9 until 11:30. So it was only 2.5 hours, and they lifted it about 20 inches. And you can see that there was a large turbine that they were trying to get under.
Right.
So the next time you go to the pedestrian bridge, think like that was a bridge that they would lift up by hand.
Yeah, anytime that you needed to get something under that, they had to come in and basically just muscle it up.
Well, and there's been some controversy, different evidence will say on how they lifted it. Some people say jacks or cranes or muscle power, but regardless, they still lifted it up for people to get under.
Yeah, I don't care how they were lifting it, that's a lot of work for 2 hours. So today serves as a public art space, and anyone is welcome to put up their art. There are no rules, and their website reads, but there are just 2 guidelines. So there's a difference between rules and guidelines. So to find out what these 2 guidelines are, you have to watch our short episode that we filmed yesterday. So that's our little teaser episode to get you ready for this. So you can go onto YouTube, you can go onto Facebook, and you can find our episode about the art bridge that we did. And it's a deeper dive into the bridge's culture and significance.
Yes. So one of the things that's cool about this bridge is that it's a pedestrian bridge.
Right.
So one of the highlights in the Penn Street Vision Plan is walkability. Jane Jacobs wrote this famous book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. It's a little dated, it's from 1961, but I like her discussion about walkability in cities. She claimed that city planners from the 50s and 60s ignored the rhythm and heart of a city, and she said that instead of focusing on the people, they attempted to force order. And the Penn Street Bridge is a great example of how there is order. There are rule guidelines. Yeah, but it's really this space where anyone can come and share their voice.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like a modern day soapbox. Jim McClure has called it like a newspaper. You can go and see what's important to the community.
Your daily
at the time.
news.
Yeah. So she said also, this is Jane Jacobs, she said, a thriving city has active use sidewalks. People who just drive through their cars miss the point. They aren't taking the time to see and experience. So when the 3 of us walked Penn Street, we noticed some things.
Right.
That's what we're going to talk about now.
Yeah, so when we were walking, we noticed that there were groups of people outside. There was 2 or 3 men sitting on the stoop. There were women getting their mail. And they were looking out the windows and the businesses, so they were kind of just, keeping an eye on things. But then when we were walking, we also noticed that some of the sidewalks were broken up. There were roots from trees that were cracking the sidewalks, but there was also this beautiful artwork that a child, I assume, created with their chalk.
Right.
So it was beautiful. There were things that could be fixed, but there were also things that we could point out. But I would have never noticed those things if I was driving through the town.
Right.
So walking gave me, more visibility to the things that do need changed, and then the things that are already working for them.
Yep.
So if you think back to MLK Park, oh, I'm reading your part. Duh. Oh, I'm sorry. So think back to MLK Park. Are there houses whose windows look directly out at the park?
Yeah, here it is. Here's a picture of it.
It's like their own little surveillance community watch group. So you can look at the park and you can feel comfortable with your kids playing in the park.
Yeah.
And then while you're in the park, you can look out at the neighborhoods and see what's going on. And I think it's nice because it brings the community together, and you're looking out for each other. You're helping each other out.
So the takeaway is that when you see people on the streets, that is a positive. That means that it's like a do-it-yourself surveillance system.
It is.
That's a sign of a healthy system. So I'm going to go back here for a second. This is in the Penn Street Vision Plan. Here are some of their goals to add to the length of Penn Street. One is better lighting, which a lot of lights have already been installed.
Right.
There are some trees that they're thinking about taking down because the roots have really jacked up the sidewalk, and so more urban appropriate trees to make sure they don't get too tall.
Right.
But then also beautiful stamped concrete, so it adds to this look, so it's not just this bland tan color, but then also it's cost effective. Instead of putting in actual brick, instead you can stamp concrete, and it's a little bit cheaper and more affordable.
Yeah, and as we were walking through, we did notice that there are some sections that have the stamped concrete, but it's not the whole way through. And then we also noticed that we loved the fact that the trees provided shade. So with the appropriate trees, you're going to get that shade, and it's still going to look beautiful, but your sidewalks aren't going to be as affected with the giant roots coming through.
Hopefully, the idea is short-term inconvenience for long-term gain. So finally, we are out of breath and exhausted and at Farquhar Park, which is a great reprieve because there's lots of trees for us to sit and chill. So here's the end of our presentation, beginning to.
Yeah, so this park is one of the largest green spaces in New York City, and it was founded in the 1890s, and it's at the top of the hill overlooking the city, and it's named after A.B. Farquhar, a businessman who manufactured framing equipment. Farming equipment. And there's a playground, there's tennis courts, there's walking paths, pavilions, and exercise stations in the park. So there used to be an amusement park near the park, which I didn't know about until we were researching this topic.
Yeah. This is a map that you can see where the amusement park was. Farquhar Park is obviously the large tree area, and then the place that is outlined in white, that is the Ferguson Elementary School.
Yeah, so it's called the White Rose Amusement Park, which is a fitting name because it's the White Rose City, and it even had a pool beside it. But it wasn't all fun and games, and it was closed due to the polio epidemic, political mishandlings, and even racism, unfortunately. And they would rather close the amusement park than integrate.
So when they said you have to integrate, they said no, we're going to close, and that's not a great part of York history.
No, it's not.
Yep. Here's a picture showing you what the amusement park would have looked like. This was in New York City. Like,
I know.
That's really cool.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was saying. It's a sort of a part of York history that I didn't even know about.
Right, I didn't either.
So,
yep. So where we started in this presentation tonight is we started down south at the rail trail and the Knowledge Park, and we ended the whole way north up at Farquhar Park. The Penn Street Vision Plan calls this park-to-park connections, and they actually identified 9 different locations of parks along the route. One of the things that they want to add is they want to add signs, both in Spanish and in English, that direct people, but then also give you historical information. And I love this part. They are going to have, hopefully, a cleanup program that involves the local kids to come in and take care of and clean up.
Oh, nice.
So teaching them like civic leadership at a very young age, and also feeling like it's a part of them and they're in charge, and giving them something to do that is going to help everybody in the long run.
No, I love that idea. So our takeaways. So Penn Street and its corridor is one of those city neighborhoods that hasn't attracted investments, and it's part of it are unchanged since it was a focal point of the York race riots in the 1960s. But there's a plan now in place to change that. Difference makers like Montez Parker, who is from Penn Street and who we're interviewing after our short intermission, may have left York, but many like him are coming back with a renewed vision. And despite our reputation, millennials are becoming the next generation of leaders.
Woo!
It's true. So, and if we could call the vision plan one word, we would call it coordinators. And the goal is not to bring in chain stores, but locally owned businesses, and to help the people that are already living here get a step up.
So we're going to have Q&A here in a second, but if you can, join us for our next presentation. That will be on July 19th. This is going to be a private event. It's not public. We wish it could be, but it's going to be on the Haynes Shoe House. We're going to interview Tom Davidson, who is instrumental with a new Pennsylvania historical marker that's going to be there. In about 15 minutes after we're done with the Q&A, we're going to have Montez Parker II on here, and we're going to ask him some questions about the vision plan, and he's going to be able to tell us a lot more information and also take your questions as well. So at this point where we're at, we would love to hear from the audience if you have either questions or comments that you'd just like to make.
Repeat the question.
I grew up in Red Vine, and I was born in Ennerstown, down below Red Vine. Cape Town, and lived here all my young life. Then I moved to York. And what is York is home. I live in Tacoma, Washington, way out in the Pacific, you know. The drive here. And I was on the Red Coast, and I saw everybody, and I wanted to come home. My son said, "You're not going." I said, "Yes, I am, son." I got my ticket, I packed all my furniture up, had a truck from California take it here to York. East York.
And now you're here.
Now I'm here.
So a woman in the audience said that Retro York, Jim McClure's page on Facebook, actually inspired her to move back to York after living really far away for a long time. So
She grew up in Red Lion, lived in Cape Horn Road, and then even in California. And York, she said, felt like home to her. And now you're here to stay?
Yeah, and now they have pictures of the whole state on a website. And I just love it. I want to go all over.
All over Pennsylvania. Yeah. We love our state too. She said she wants to go all over Pennsylvania. Yeah, I love that we have the 4 seasons, and there's not a lot of venomous like reptiles or like spiders or kind of like that.
Tell that to the giant wolf spider that was in my kitchen last night. It was the size of my palm.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
I put it in a bowl and I threw it out my front door.
Yeah, I took one along with Washington.
Are there any other questions or comments? from the audience, either in person or online? Yes.
Yeah, I remember that bridge, everybody used to take their cars and jump it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, someone in the audience said that people used to jump their cars over that bridge. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's when the bridge was known for. Fly right over it or BMX bikes.
Okay, so BMX bikes or cars, you would just floor it and go right over the bridge.
So how did you have people that would like organize and stand below and like tell people, watch out, there's car comes, or did you just launch it?
Just launched it. We know what you were doing when you were a kid.
Muscle cars back then, you know?
Muscle cars, okay.
When you say back,
Now you wouldn't do that with those cars.
So how far is back then?
Oh, like trucks, like Dukes of Hazzard.
Dukes of Hazzard.
okay. And were any cars bottom out? They all survived it?
Yeah.
Ah,
Wow.
no, he's smiling. That gave it away. They did not survive
Some
it.
close calls,
Yeah.
I
But
think.
they actually lifted that bridge one time with 2 helicopters. They called it the war bridge.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Really? Do you know?
Yeah, they flew up 2 helicopters.
So he said that 2 helicopters lifted up the bridge back before it was the our
Walking
bridge.
bridge, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember about what year that was?
Yeah, it was Warner or somebody up there. I mean,
72 Agnes went through, and the Codorus was up to the George Street Bridge.
Yep.
And then on Philadelphia Street.
She was talking about Agnes and how far up the water came to the George Street Bridge in Philadelphia Street.
Yep. Which is another hometown history episode. Domi and I
Yes.
discuss Agnes and what it did to York. It is on our YouTube channel.
And Sandra Stockton,
Yeah.
who we mentioned before, she has her book, 480 Codorus Street. She
was
talks
there,
about her
yeah.
experience going through the flood and saving her family.
So what else? Anyone else have stories of Penn Street and
Yes.
what it was like?
Are any of the any local contractors? Montez, would you like to speak to that? Okay. Sure. So, the gentleman in the audience asked if any local contractors are going to be involved in the vision plan and the revitalization, and Montez said that that is going to be covered in about 15 minutes.
So why don't we segue into that? We can begin our extra, so come back in about 15 minutes and
Yes.
we can continue this Q&A, especially with Montez.
Thank you. Yeah.
What was that